see, our presenting sponsor is Amazon. Our title sponsors are Capital One Cafe, Dell Technologies, and the Downtown Denver Partnership. And this track, the growth track, is sponsored by Slalom. So definitely, if we see on the next slide here, I think you guys have all seen the number of people that have come together to make Denver Startup Week work. And so with that, we will move forward into our presentation. The one thing I will say to everyone, they asked me to make sure that everyone knows about our code of conduct. Are we all good? No rowdy people? Little rowdy? Little rowdy's okay. Just can't get too crazy. And if you do want to post about this at all, utilize hashtag DenStartup. People my age might call it like #DenStartup, but I'm going to go with hashtag. Thanks for coming. You've come to sit and chat with Allison and myself on this journey of moving fast, acting small, managing change, and actually taking that and acting a little bit more like a startup, right? So before we go too far into this, definitely want to do some quick introductions. And I'll let Allison start off.
Hi, everyone. Is it still, can you hear me at all? Anything? You gotta get even closer, Brett. Really close. Okay. My name is Allison Torpy. I'm the managing director. Sorry, this chair is really not working for me. I'm the managing director of Propeller's Denver office. I've been with Propeller a little over 8 years now. Moved to Denver to help start the Denver office about 3 years ago from Portland. We'll talk a little bit more about Propeller as Brett gets into his section, but Propeller is only 10 years old as a company, so I've been with the firm since almost the very beginning. Prior to joining Propeller, I had a brief stint in supply chain after coming out of my MBA, and before that I did something entirely different. I worked in architecture and construction. So during my time at Propeller, I spent a few years as a consultant, working as project manager, change manager in both retail and utility clients. Then I actually came internal to stand up and run our people strategy function. Most recently stood up and now running the Denver office. Brett.
Awesome. Thanks, Allison. Can you hear me better now? No? How about now? A little bit better? All right, we're going to go with this. So Brett Dilley, I am a 30-year resident of Colorado. I've been in the Denver business community just a little over 20 years. And in my time here, I had a chance to work in multiple industries. So started banking and finance, worked in manufacturing, worked in telecommunications, some business-to-business products, hospitality and tourism, and joined Propeller just last year. As I think about my time in those different industries, I think I've also had an opportunity to work in multiple functions. So HR, operations, finance, marketing, and even information technology, sometimes called IT, right? So many different hats, many different industries, and I think for me, the piece I think about every day, if I say, hey, it was a successful day for me, it was a day that I had an opportunity to learn something from someone, had an opportunity to teach something to someone, and had an opportunity to find gratitude in something in that day. So my challenge today for myself, I think I've got two pieces, right? Gratitude, yes, I'm grateful that all of you are here to join Allison and I on this journey. I'm pretty sure that I'm going to learn something from this crowd today, right? There's going to be a little interaction, and I know I'm going to pick something up from you, and I'm hopeful at the end, I'll check back in, but I'm hopeful that you'll have learned something from either Allison or myself. Sound good? Awesome. Talk about our agenda. We're going to do a little bit of an introduction. I'll talk a little bit about Propeller and kind of who we are as an organization. Then I'm going to actually do some introductions with this group. So, pre-warning, if you have a cell phone, it's okay to pull it out, okay? We're going to do a little poll everywhere. We'll walk through instructions here in a moment, but we'll kind of do a little live play and understand who's here. Then we're going to walk through and talk about our three, call them tried and true approaches to managing change and scaling effectively. We'll wrap things up, have a little Q&A, and then I'll check back in to make sure that hopefully you guys learned something from us. Sound good? Let's talk about Propeller for a quick second. If you can see up on the screen, we've got this picture. This is the team at our offsite this year. So coming out of the pandemic, we actually had an opportunity to bring our entire firm together. About a little over 175 consultants, over 200 people in our firm, and primarily a local-based model. So based in Portland, offices in San Francisco, Silicon Valley, opened Denver in 2019, and then recently have grown into the Dallas-Fort Worth, Minneapolis, St. Paul area. As I think about it, we are somewhat industry recognized. Just this year had the pleasure of being announced as a Best Place to Work medium company from Fortune and Best Places to Work. So pretty great honor. I think more important to me than that title or that badge that we've been given is the fact that 97% of our employees at the firm all rated Propeller as a great place to work. So it's not just kind of out there, it's the people inside. We'll talk more about the culture as we go through, but to me that's pretty darn important. If I think about how we approach our work, for us, it's really getting to know our clients, getting to know their business, actually taking the time to embed ourselves with our clients, thinking through their tough problems, working with them, partnering with them to come up with creative solutions that fit to them, and then also helping them build those muscles. So it's not just we're there consistently, it's we're there, let's help them solve the problem, let's actually help them learn how to continue to solve problems like this going forward. And I think the last piece I'll talk about is, we are really thinking about things from a solution agnostic perspective. We don't come in with hey, here's our playbook, there's one size fits all, we've done this before, here's how you need to do it. Rather, we say, let's understand your problem, let's understand your unique situation, your unique set of circumstances, and then think about tools, technology, solutions that are agnostic, that are applied directly to you and will fit with the problems that you're facing. With that, as I mentioned, time for the phones. So let's pull out the phones here. It's really hard to read up here. I can tell that. If you go to text Propeller to 22333, that will start this interaction with each other. Or you can actually answer the poll questions at pollev.com/propeller. So two options. I'll give everyone just a couple seconds to get up and rolling. Yeah, absolutely. So you can go to pollev.com/propeller, or you can text Propeller to 22333. All right. Everyone looks like they're in. Feeling good. Cool. This is where I just kind of want to understand, hey, who's in the crowd? Who's here? What does it look like in your world? So we'll start off with, what industry do you currently work in? To me, this is important. As we start talking through some of these 3 tried and true approaches, we think about that this can be applied to any industry. It doesn't matter if you're coming from manufacturing, agriculture, business services. It's something that can be applied across the board. So I look at the group, 50% of us in business services, a bit in technology, some education. We do have some agriculture, awesome. And healthcare is coming in, I see that, awesome. Thanks for sharing that with us. It'll help guide us kind of through the conversation as we move forward. Let's go on to the next question. How many years of professional experience do you have? Where this comes, I'll call it important to me. As I mentioned, 20 plus years in the Denver business community. I see that there are people kind of in that 3 to 10 year space, maybe kind of really starting to get into their careers. The approaches that we're going to be sharing not only are they something that can be applied no matter where you're at in your career, I think it's important to think about the fact that it doesn't matter how far you are in your career. These are still approaches that we come back to, that we have to remind ourselves of. We have to continue to bring focus to, no matter how far you are. Ooh, size of your current company. As this is coming up, I kind of mentioned that Propeller has an opportunity to work with multiple clients across multiple industries. That includes the size of company. So not only from what I'll call like that pure startup, maybe 1, 2, 3 people, into Fortune 500 organizations with tens of thousands of employees across multiple geographies and different lines of business. I see, we got a pretty strong distribution here. I kind of expected there'd be a lot on that A group, right, in Denver Startup Week, of really thinking, hey, 1 to 50 employees. Hopefully some of the approaches that we can talk to you about today will help you grow out of that size and move into some of these, the next buckets. One last piece, and it's really just thinking about where in the organization do you work. As I mentioned, my background is kind of all over HR, finance, IT. I'm really glad that people are starting to weigh in on that last piece. I think that's something that we see, especially as organizations are starting to grow, is it's not just like I'm in one function, but what function am I not in? What am I not doing? We're getting scrappy and we're actually just solving problems. And today I've got to wear an HR hat, tomorrow I've got to wear a finance hat. These approaches that we'll talk through will help you no matter what function you sit in. Thanks for sharing this with us. Again, we're going to continue to let this guide our conversation as we go through. But I'm going to turn it over to Allison to talk a little bit more about the core function of Propeller.
Cool. So thanks, Brett. And thank you all for sharing a little bit about yourselves. Like Brett said, that's super helpful for us as we're moving forward and kind of sharing some of our thoughts and best practices with you all. We'd like to start by sharing some more information around something that's really core to Propeller, our culture manifesto, and it really guides everything that we do and every business decision that we make. So I'll just walk through. There's 8 principles. I'll walk through what they mean to each of us really quickly, and then we'll talk about how these can be applied to some of the learnings that Brett and I would like to share with you this afternoon. So first, commit to people. This is listed first in our manifesto intentionally. It's because we believe Propeller was founded on the kind of a business experiment that if we start by committing to people, the rest will follow. And when we say people, we mean our employees, our communities, and our clients. Serve exceptionally. We're in the managed services industry. We're here to serve our clients. This is core to what we do. Do good work. We can't serve exceptionally unless we're doing good work for our clients. Be humble yet smart enough to have an ego. We're aware of the fact that consultants often have a reputation for being a little bit egotistical. We believe that's important. It's important to be confident, but it's also really important to be humble and to be open to trying new things and making mistakes. Harness grit. The work that we do is really hard. We're often sending our employees into new situations and new environments every day. And so it's really important to be able to roll up your sleeves, try new things, and just be really gritty in everything that you do. Uplift our communities. So we have a local for local model. We have an office that's right up the street, and we serve a lot of local clients in the Denver community. Same in Portland, the Bay, Minneapolis, and Dallas. And it's really important for us not only to be serving clients, but also to be engaged in the local community from a nonprofit pro bono community service perspective. Embrace our differences. To us, this doesn't just mean race, gender, age, but it also means life experience, where you're from, where you've worked, what other sort of things you can bring to the table. And the more diverse perspectives and opinions we can have in the firm, the better we can be as a group. And drive forward. So we're here today to talk about how to help small companies scale effectively. Without this final principle, we have to always be thinking about what's next. How can we get better? How can we grow? That's what this last principle means to us. So now that we've talked about some of the core principles to Propeller, we'd like to talk about how we've leveraged those things both internally in Propeller as well as with our clients in order to manage change and scale effectively. So first, we'll talk about the importance of building an enduring culture. We'll talk about developing an abundance mindset, and that's kind of a buzzword that we've maybe made up, but we'll talk about what that means. And then we'll talk about wrapping that all together to become a learning organization to grow and scale. So first, building an enduring culture. The first thing here that we'd like to really underscore is the importance of focusing on culture early and often. So that culture manifesto I just ran through at Propeller's culture manifesto, I should say, we developed that. I remember so I was the 21st hire at Propeller. My first days at the firm were at our all firm offsite. Very different picture than the one Brett showed earlier. But a small organization, our founders had the idea. They knew the importance at that time of focusing on culture, and together as a group, defining and documenting what that was to us and what made us unique and what really made us, we call ourselves Propellerites. So what was it that made us special? And then once we understood that, rewarding traits that matter. So now that we know what's important to us and how we expect our employees to show up and interact with each other, how do we reward and acknowledge when people are embodying our culture manifestos that we so firmly believe in? Encourage authenticity. So just because we all embody the same principles doesn't mean they're manifested in the same way every time. So, I think about our Denver office is very different from our Portland office, is very different from our Bay Area offices. Same way, like Brett and I are very different people, but yet I think we very much embody all those principles. It's just a question of how they're manifested in our own unique and authentic ways. And then finally, attract and retain intentionally. So we, as you can imagine, when we're hiring employees, we have a set of competencies that we're assessing individuals against, but we also assess individuals against those culture principles. Similarly, once we've got employees at the firm, if we find that people are we made a mistake, that happens. We'll talk about the importance of failing and failing fast in a little bit. But if we make a mistake or we find that those principles aren't being embodied, recognizing that and as unfortunate as it can be, the importance of firing fast. So I'd like to share a little story, and I'll talk a little bit about how Propeller kind of got through the pandemic, and I'm sure you all experienced your own pandemic stories and nightmares, and all sorts of crazy stuff went on a couple years ago when the pandemic first hit in March of 2020. But for us, I think one thing that I'm really proud to say is that we grounded all of our decisions in that moment on the principles that we had defined for ourselves as a business many years prior. So we set out, our founders set out and said, we do not want to have to let anyone go as a result of this pandemic. That was our goal, that was our intention, and we stated that transparently with the organization. We said, here are the things that we will do before we even think about letting someone go. We had a list and we shared that out, starting with cutting non-essential operational expenses, cutting salaries of leadership teams, things like that. And I'm really proud to say we did not have to let anyone go. And so I talked a little bit earlier about our very first principle, commit to people. And I mentioned that for us, that means employees, communities, and clients. I'll share a few examples of what else we did in order to kind of keep people happy and whole during that time, starting with committing to our employees. For those of you that are parents, you may recall how hard and uncomfortable it was to be a parent when the pandemic first hit and your kids were no longer going to school, but yet you were expected to still work and be as productive as you were before. So we suddenly had a bunch more consultants on the bench, and what that means is they're not billing at clients, so they're kind of sitting idle, for lack of a better word, within the organization. And so we partnered those consultants with some of the parents who were billing on clients to ensure that they were able to still meet client expectations. We stood up a bunch of new benefits for employees, such as mental health and wellness benefits, childcare allowance, home office budgets, things like that. And really did everything we could to do right by our employees, to show them, to really put our money where our mouth was in terms of showing them that we cared. In terms of supporting our communities, we reached out to local nonprofits and BIPOC-led organizations and said, how can we help you? We did a lot of pro bono work, both for nonprofits as well as for target and current clients, to really showcase our commitment to our communities. And then finally, we took all these smart folks on the bench and focused them inwards and said, what can we do? We know that this is going to end sometime, right? And so what can we do to kind of build a stronger foundation for our business? And we thought about things like business development efforts, marketing, thought leadership, training, knowledge management. What can we do to build a stronger foundation for ourselves internally so that we're ready when this thing turns around? And it did. In the fall of 2020, business really started to pick back up. And I believe that because we had at that point a committed, team of employees, we had stronger relationships with our clients and our communities, and we had a stronger foundation within the firm, we were able to really come out of the pandemic and scale effectively because we had that really strong foundation.
Awesome. Thanks, Allison. I'm going to talk about abundance mindset, and Allison kind of talked a little bit about this being a bit of a buzzword, and I like to kind of ground it in my thoughts on abundance mindset. I think that there are kind of two different ways of thinking about things. You can either have what I'll call a scarcity mindset, really thinking there's limited amount of things, and when I think about it from a problem-solving perspective, it's I need to kind of be guarded. I need to not think about trying new things. I need to think about how do I kind of approach problems the same way and maybe just kind of push my way through them versus an abundance mindset. So having that mindset of every time I see a new challenge, I'm shifting it from being a challenge into being an opportunity, into being a possibility. Maybe the best way for me to kind of ground us in an abundance mindset is to talk about a specific situation that I was in here in the last couple of years. So I was brought in to help turn a team around. My role was leading business analysts for a marketing technology database team. Really, really nerdy, very data focused. But my role was to kind of say, hey, how do we think about how we're partnering with our business partners and make that a better experience? When I came in, my colleague had been with the organization for about 8 years. And as we sat down and kind of started thinking about what we were going to do moving forward, I said, let's start with who we're going to be. Let's start with understanding where we're at right now and think about where we're going to go forward. Let's start with the culture that Allison talked about before and really take a second to understand us. So what we started to think through was, all right, our team, very technical, very smart, really enjoyed being kind of at the forefront of technology, but found ourselves in a space where we were order takers to our partners on the marketing insights organization, where they were coming to us and saying, here's how I want the table in the data warehouse to look. Here's the questions that I want to solve. Here's how it should be built, and just go. It was almost like they were coming to us and taking a set of Lego instructions, throwing it over the fence, saying, just build that. Said, okay, if that's where we're at, where do we want to be? And we actually spent time, whiteboard, had the big room whiteboard set up, and just started putting ideas up. All right, what do we want to do? Well, we're really smart. We've got people who understand technology. We want to be more consultative. We want to be more of a partner, actually involved in the strategic thinking, actually involved in, rather than once the problem's been identified and the solution's been made and given the Lego instructions, we want to be part of, if this is our problem or opportunity, how can we think about that moving forward? We got this all up on the whiteboard, as you can imagine. It's like a beautiful mind thing up on the board, and we're sitting there, and all of a sudden my colleague stops and looks at me and is like, do you know what it's going to take for my team to make that happen? And I looked at him and I said, actually, I don't. And in that moment, I made a choice to not take that scarcity mindset, but to instead say, actually, no idea. Let's talk about it. Let's figure it out. And his eyes got kind of wide. Okay, well, we'd have to really think about how our team is organized. We'd have to really think about some of the resourcing that we're doing. We need to really think about how we're partnering with our marketing insights partners and figure out how we get at the table when the problems are identified. I said, okay. I said, no one will ever go for that. They've never, ever let us do something like that in the past. I said, well, why don't we try? Why don't we try a different path? We actually sat down, created a business case, sat down with our marketing insights partners, and said, look, if we do this, our team's going to level up. It's going to support your team leveling up. And ultimately, it ties back to the corporate revenue numbers. And we're going to drive more revenue for our organization, retain more employees, keep people happier. Let's try it. We tried it. We tried it with a small set. So it was one business analyst, one developer, and one marketing insight lead. It started working. We started changing a little bit more. And pretty soon, a year later, we actually had shifted that entire organization to the vision that we had on the board. And we're driving bigger revenue, driving more sales. Everyone was happier. Our org actually became a spot where technical people wanted to join our team because they saw that we were actually in the fight with our partners. They saw that we were actually in there solving problems, not just taking orders, right? So I say all of that, and I kind of bring it back to our 4 points here, right? And to me, I think about it as every single thing is an opportunity. So when I entered into that position, that was an opportunity to kind of say, hey, let's rethink what's going on. How do we solve this problem better? We took a step back. We had that blank space, had that whiteboard, kind of put the whole beautiful mind thing up there, and had this idea. And at that point is when the abundance mindset again came in. And we said, instead of saying, no, this won't work, it's never worked, no one will give us this, we said, well, let's try it in a little bit different way. We looked at all of our possibilities, reimagined them. We went and sat down with our partners. And no, we hadn't done it. But it wasn't that we hadn't done it, we just hadn't done it yet. We sat, partnered with them, figured out how to move forward, and came out with a great solution, people happy, driving the results that we wanted to get to. If I think about applying that to Propeller and some of the work that we've done with our clients, I've got one client in particular, done some fantastic work with. It started off with an opportunity. So here is called multi-regional healthcare company, over 150 offices, people kind of disparate all over. They've continued to roll out healthcare technology, and it just hasn't landed well. They do a great job on the project management side. The product's great, but no one's brought along. No one actually knows when things are going to happen, when the new technology is going to hit, why it's even important. The opportunity, luckily, there were a couple people in the organization who had seen how change management and proper communication and getting people on board can work. They reached out to us and said, hey, can you help us maybe get through these next couple of technology implementations and see what we can do to change things around? Absolutely. Let's jump in. We got on board. We started looking at things and said, before we go too far, let's go back to Allison's principle of culture and say, what drives you as an organization? What is it that matters to you? What is it that when you come in every day, when you leave, you can say, yes, this was a successful day? Resoundingly, every one of them said, patient experience. That's what matters to us. That's why we do what we do. That's why we get up and deal with all this every day, is we want to have better health outcomes for our patients. We said, awesome. Let's keep that in mind. Let's keep coming back to that culture. Started going through the process with them, really understanding, thinking about new ways of how do we look at what they've done in the past, what communication channels they've used, how they've done training, how they've brought advocates in, and start changing and looking at, are there other avenues that we can look at? And every time we felt resistance from the start, we said, let's go back. Is this going to make a better patient experience? And if yes, then why are we not trying? Why are we not trying to push this forward? All in all, we came up with great solutions. We actually had 2 different technology implementations and said, let's take a small one to start, has a little bit smaller scope, a little smaller span across the organization, show people that this can work. We did that, did things well, got some advocates. Actually took that and took those advocates and said, now let's apply it across the larger implementation of the whole organization. Utilized and leveraged those champions that we had built, and we're able to actually take some new approaches. Instead of people were saying, oh, email, we always use email, it doesn't work. I don't read my email. I've got like 1,000 unread emails every day, right? I see people nodding, they're like, yeah, it's my inbox right now. We said, well, is there a place that every single person goes every day? Well, yeah, we log in, we go to the intranet site, we go, whoa, can we put a message on the intranet site? Oh, we never thought about that. well, let's try that. Next day it was up. All of a sudden people were going, hey, I hear that there's this new technology implementation coming. Can you tell me more about it? It's coming in here in like a month. We started utilizing some new approaches, started getting people thinking about new ways of doing this. And ultimately we're able to go live, have more people involved, have more buy-in. Now, not perfect, right? There are people who still were, this is going to be tough, but we were better than we were before, and people were seeing the value. And we started to kind of get that mindset away from, we can't do this, to we just haven't done it yet.
Thanks, Brett. So wrapping it all together, how do we take a strong culture and a team and a group of people that have fostered a strong abundance mindset and really become a learning organization, which we believe is really important in terms of iterating and ultimately driving forward. So first, ruthlessly prioritize. There will always be too much work to do, always. Your to-do list will never be done. You'll always be getting asked to do more work. I think one thing that we like to talk about here, and I'm constantly encouraging my team, what is good enough? And more importantly, what do you need to get to good enough right now? Just because you were assigned a task, you started working on something last week, doesn't mean it's actually the thing that you should be working on right now. So how are you kind of looking across the landscape of all the things that you're working on and you're responsible for, and understanding intuitively what's most important and where you can add most value to the business in that moment? That's what we mean by ruthlessly prioritize. From there, take calculated risks. Brett talked about, starting small with one small project and then moving into the larger organization. I think it's really important to try new things, test things out, try out that landing page, see what works, and don't be afraid to fail. That's our third point here. But if you're going to fail fast. Take a small risk, make a mistake, learn from it. There's nothing wrong with failing. In fact, failing is a great thing. What actually matters is what you learn and what you do from your failure. And then finally, incorporate feedback loops. So all of this is a cycle. Prioritize, make sure you're working on the most important thing, take a risk, make a mistake, and then learn, listen, ask what I could have done better, be humble, be confident enough that you were right to try something new, but then be humble enough to be like, whoops, let me try again. So that's really what we mean by becoming a learning organization. And I'll just tell you one last quick story about a client that we helped, kind of just to Brett's point, do something different. Be successful in an implementation that they were really looking to drive forward, that they'd actually failed not one, not two, not three, not four times. We were brought in on the 5th attempt at this transformation for a part of the business. I don't know why we said yes. Maybe we were crazy. I'm not certain. But we did, and we came in and we tried, and we did something that not only the client hadn't done before, but Propeller hadn't done before. So we were all in this kind of new abundance mindset sort of state of mind. But we all tried it, and we all jumped into the pool together because we had this strong culture, and we believed in each other, and we were acting authentically and transparently amongst each other, and we believed, like, the heck, we've got to try it. And if we haven't tried it before, there's nothing saying it won't happen this time. So we did a few things different that I'd like to call out specifically, and I'm proud to say that actually this 5th attempt was successful. So the end of the story is positive, but a few of the things that we did differently. One, we prioritized the initiatives in a different sequence. So they had originally started the transformation at an entirely different phase, let's imagine 5 sort of steps. They started at step 5 or 1, whatever direction you want to call it. We started at the completely opposite end. And we started small. We started with an MVP. For those of you that don't know what that stands for, minimum viable product. We felt it was really important to get something out to the business immediately or as quickly as possible so that they could start interacting with it, giving us feedback so that we could learn from our mistakes and incorporate feedback into the next iteration. We structured the team differently. So instead of just focusing on the technology, which is really easy to do if you're in a data organization, just think about the configuration. How do I set the system up? We actually thought about running this thing as a program. So how are all the different components integrating? What do we need to own and what's relevant and important? The project management, the process optimization, the data and tech certainly, but actually most importantly, the change management. How are these people experiencing this change? What do they want their system to do? How are they going to use it? And we spend a lot of time and energy thinking about change management and the impact to the people and the end users, and interacting with them, making sure they were bought in and engaged throughout the process. And then finally, in terms of this feedback, incorporating feedback loops and failing fast, we worked agilely and iteratively as a not just in the software development bit of it, and frankly more in the like teaming bit of it. We had daily stand-ups where we talked about what are we working on, where are our blockers, where can we use help. And I think one thing that we did, again, just as like a people side of things, not as a technology side of things, we had weekly retros where we got this entire team together, 20 plus people, every single Friday for an hour, mandatory meeting. Let's have some fun. Every week we had a different person come and present something that was important or interesting to them. Could be their recent experience at Burning Man. Could be a story about their grandmother. Could be, let me share some baking recipes with you. Whatever it was that was important to that individual, we used it as an opportunity for folks to get to know each other a little bit better. We talked about how people are feeling. Imagine that in a technology implementation. Am I feeling overwhelmed? Am I happy? Am I sad? And to make it even more fun, we used emojis. We made people describe their feelings in emojis, which, maybe for me and Brett, like that feels crazy. For the younger crowd, maybe that's normal. I'm not certain, but in any case, it worked. It was effective. And then finally, we talked about what's working, what's not, what can we do better, and what do we want to try in advance of next week's retro. So, and if we agreed to try something, we agreed to try something bite-sized and something that we felt like we could accomplish between this week and next week. And then we would reflect back, what did we say we were going to try? Did it work? If not, why? If yes, why? If not, was it because we didn't try hard enough? Was it because it wasn't a good idea? What should we try next, or should we scrap this thing and move on? So I think the kind of underlying theme here is that we were really open to continuous improvement, learning, growing, getting better as a team, not just in the work, but in how we work together. And so I mentioned earlier, we came in fifth attempt at a rollout. There were 5 modules to be rolled out. We started small with 1. We're just now wrapping up the last rollout of the fifth module. All of them were MVP status, so minimum viable product. What can we get out to the business so they can use it and test it and play with it? And now we're in conversations with the business about what do we want to see next? What future enhancements do we want? What other modules do we want? What do we want to think about for 2023 and beyond for our business and our business partners?
That's awesome. I do recall that there was a retrospective around the top action movies of the 90s that somebody brought through. That was a good one. I like that one. I'll kind of wrap all this up for us here and then turn it over to questions for everyone. I think it doesn't matter what organization we're in. It doesn't matter the size of the organization, what business you're in. I mean, we kind of did the poll and we saw that we're really kind of a diverse crowd here. All of us are trying to figure out, how do we manage change? It's continually coming at us. How do we scale effectively? And how do we make sure that, whether it's my team, my organization, my corporation, how am I getting myself through this? I think what Allison and I wanted to share here with everyone was our approach. And our approach not only with our clients, but our approach even looking at ourselves and looking kind of inward to say, how do we manage change? How do we scale effectively? And the way I think about that is, first and foremost, starting with culture and kind of creating that bedrock. I mean, if you can start with who are we going to be? Who are we now? What are we as a group? It sets that kind of focus and something to come back to when things get tough. I think it's then saying, how do I actually put that hat on and have that abundance mindset? How do I look at when the new challenge comes in, instead of saying, oh, we've got a problem today, and be like, ooh, we've got an opportunity today. We maybe haven't done it, but we've got a chance to actually do something pretty cool that we haven't gotten through. And finally, taking all of that and becoming more of a learning organization. Kind of saying, did that go well? What did I learn from it? Did I fail? Great. What can I take from that? I think if we look at kind of this model up here, becoming that learning organization gets us to come back to who are we and what is our culture. Gets us to come back to trying new opportunities, trying new things out, and kind of habitually gets you in that cycle and gets that flywheel really moving forward, right? And it takes a little bit to get going. And then once it starts going and it keeps going, you really have built this momentum and have the ability to kind of keep that momentum going forward. And it's easier and easier for you as an organization. So I think my challenge to everyone here is think about these things. Think about your organization. Think about who you are, what's important to you, what are your values, what is the kind of the mission that's driving you. How do I take that, use it as my foundation, and be able to kind of put on that abundance mindset and learn from it and keep moving things forward. So I think with that, you have the ability to move fast, have the ability to act small and kind of get through things a little scrappy, no matter your size, and ultimately have the ability to manage change and scale effectively. I think we'll leave you with one quote, and then we'll open up for Q&A. This is from the actress that played Pippi Longstocking. It says, "I've never tried that before, so I think I should definitely be able to do that." Right? And I think that's the mindset that we would challenge everyone to have. Hopefully when you go back and you're thinking about these things, you've got a great process to move forward, and maybe this serves as a framework that you can use. However, if you find yourself in a place and you want to just have a thought partner, feel free to reach out to either myself or Allison. We're happy to walk through this journey with you. With that, I'll open it up for questions. Don't all jump up too fast. Yeah.
I can take that one. It's a great question. So the question was around, we're geographically dispersed. How do we think about culture, and how much of it do we want to be controlled centrally versus empower, enable individual locations to have their own sort of flavor of the corporate culture? And so it's a great question. It's something we think about and talk about a lot. Like I said earlier, we have these 8 principles that we very much believe in adhering to, and all of us sort of embodying every day. But we also understand that the way in which those things are manifested were very different when we wrote the manifesto 8 years ago, are very different in Propeller Denver than they are in Propeller San Francisco. But yet, like I mentioned earlier, I moved out here 3 years ago to start the Denver office. We did the same thing with our Bay Area offices. We moved strong consultants from our Portland headquarters down to San Francisco and down to Silicon Valley to seed those offices, because those were people that knew our culture and were embedded in our ways of working and understood that stuff so intuitively that we could then disperse it amongst the local teams. Does that answer your question? Cool. What else? Yeah.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Awesome. Set me up for that. Now, well played. Well played. The question was around managing up, right? And more senior individuals kind of maybe not living by the culture. Is that what I'm hearing? And kind of how do we handle that? I think it's a couple of ways of thinking about that, both internally and with our clients. So I think internally, it becomes coming back to this somewhat of an agreement as a firm and saying this is our culture manifesto. This is what we live by. Honestly, I think we've created a space in our firm where it's comfortable to have that conversation with anyone within the organization. Whether that's telling Allison, "Hey, Allison, you're really not living up to our culture today. You gotta or even into our corporate office and into our founders and our senior leaders. I think we've created a safe space, and I think that's the key to make sure that people are not only feel comfortable doing that, but that our senior leaders are also reminding people, please bring me insight, please bring me feedback, and kind of creating that feedback loop that Allison talked about. I think with our clients, it comes back to kind of creating that space and that agreed upon culture from the get-go, right? And kind of having that ability to pause people and say, hey, I think we agreed upon how we were going to interact with each other, how we were going to interact with the team. It might feel like we're getting off on that model together. Can we talk about how we get back there? Can we talk about how maybe we kind of reset and have that moment of coming back to what we've agreed upon? I think it's kind of creating and helping our teams build what I'll call that executive presence and that ability to feel comfortable talking at all levels within the organization. In fact, it's something that we as a firm, we look at and say, it doesn't matter how young you are in your career, every one of our consultants needs to have that foundation of the ability to kind of speak up and manage up. It's something that we focus on. We're actually wrapping up a series on executive presence with our organization just this week, where we've taken all of our consultants through various workshops to kind of deal with those types of situations. It's always learning. Yeah, like I say, I'm trying to learn something new every day. Real quick, did anybody learn anything today? Did we teach anybody anything? Not just Cameron. That's it. Nobody else. I'm gonna take that. That's a successful day. Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Oh yeah. Mhm. Okay. Thank you. The question was around abundance mindset, right? And how do you shift from always needing more resource and just saying, give me more money, give me more resource, give me more FTE, to shifting that mindset to maybe a pivot or a reuse of those resources, right? I think with our clients, it's having those conversations of, and it's an interesting thing to put scarcity into the abundance mindset, right? But we do have to think about the fact that we have a limited amount of resource maybe within our organization, so we can't just continue to go raise capital, right? So you have to get back to that ruthless prioritization that Allison was talking about, and really say, we have multiple things that we want to do. Maybe some of those are the most important things, and in order to do that, we need to dial back in some other areas, maybe shift resources, pivot. I think the key, though, is having that ability to think about, how are we going to do this differently? It's not just, let's just move resources and send everything out into the wild in the exact same way we've been doing it before, but it's about thinking of how do we do it differently? How do we become more efficient? How do we become more effective? How do we maybe think about the things that we're doing that we really shouldn't be, to open up more time, energy, resource to pivot to those spaces? So it's getting creative, right?
I just have a little anecdote to share. Not an anecdote, I guess, but something to share that I think is relevant. So I mentioned earlier, my background is actually in architecture and construction. And one thing that I found to be really interesting going through art school and thinking about architecture and design is that oftentimes the most interesting and creative solutions actually came with a problem set that was most constrained. With unlimited resources, you can kind of do whatever, and you can be really lazy, and you don't have to be very thoughtful or careful about anything you're doing. With a lot of constraints, it forces creativity and prioritization and making sure that you're putting your time and your money in the places that are most valuable. So, going back to our embrace differences and diversity principles, I think it is very unusual to find a consultant who has an art degree, but perhaps not so unusual at Propeller, and we do that intentionally because there are things that I'm bringing to the table that are very different than people like Brett, who have experience in data and analytics and business degree and things like that bring to the table, and his background is perhaps a little bit more traditional for consulting, but I think the fact that we're both here and we balance each other out in a really unique and interesting way is actually the interesting thing there. Yeah, Courtney. I'm not going to give you a number because I don't know, 60%. But I will say that, I mentioned we wrote our culture manifesto when I first started at the firm, when 2 years into the founding of the firm, 20 employees. We actually revisited the culture manifesto about 5 or 6 years in. I can't remember exactly. Instead of 20 people at the firm, we now had 120 people. And the question was, are these things still right? Because to your point, like, how much of this are we defining early on and how much is changing as we grow? And the beautiful thing, I think, that we found to be true was that actually all those things were still relevant and were still embodied in our people. And I think it's because, we were in that 60 to 70% definition early on, and we kept it front of mind as we grew. But we also actually rewrote it. I didn't share that part of the story, but there were 10 principles originally, and we whittled it down to 8, and we renamed some of them, and we gave everyone a brand new book that had slightly different definitions for each of them. But at its core, like, commit to people is still first. At its core, it's still the same. Does that answer your question? The more cuddles, the better. That would be my number one. Yeah. Okay, well, I know we have 4 minutes left. Are there any? Doug?
Yeah, so Doug's question was around that startups tend to focus more on their customers from the get-go, and us thinking of how do we guide large organizations to think and act more like startups, kind of missing a bit of that, tying it back to the customer, right? Yeah. Awesome. Yes. Sure, sure. 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 Doug, I think I actually see your point of it being more important than culture. I would maybe Sure. And everyone made money. Sure, sure. Doug, I think that there are organizations that we have worked with where we still have to start with culture. If I go back to my example of the healthcare organization, their customer was their patients. And by grounding them and saying, hey, our success is based on patient outcomes, it's bringing them back to that piece of having that interaction. I think it's important. I think 100% it's important what you're saying. Of companies need to know where the dollars are coming from, right, and be in touch with them. So definitely something that we still consult with our clients, but maybe just not as explicitly. Right, right. Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks, Doug. Other questions? I think we're at time. Thank you for everyone coming today. Appreciate the time.